Here before you we have a panel of citizens who have come forward, volunteered to run for city office as candidates for city council and for mayor. And tonight we'll be hearing a little bit from each of them about what their plans are for the city and what their motivations are for running for office. So why don't we start out from hearing from each of the candidates and hear from them about what it is that motivated them to run for office. We'll start with our mayoral candidate, Bruce Williams.
Thank you, Eric. I've been on the council for 14 years, and during that time, I've always tried to be in touch with and provide service for the residents of Ward 3. At the same time, I recognize that there are a lot of issues that are citywide issues and issues that deal with other municipalities in Maryland, with other jurisdictions in the Washington region, with the county, with the state. So I've always been active in working on those larger issues with those bigger entities and trying to network with and communicate about all of the various issues that are so important for us as we deal with those other jurisdictions. And so I think that a little change from ward-specific representation to the mayor will give me an opportunity to work on those even more and hone my skills and help the residents of the city get the services, the money, and the various things that we need from all those larger jurisdictions. So that's why I'm running for mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. And Mr. Josh Wright is running for council member for Ward 1.
Good evening. For me, it's really about community. I've always been a volunteer in the communities in which I've lived. Here in Takoma Park, that's been serving on the library board, the Health Services Impact Committee meeting, and also with the Main Street Initiative. And I see serving on the council as just a furthering of that commitment of volunteering, and I also believe in the power of people to work together to improve their community. So I see my role as a future council person as really engaging with the residents and the citizens of Takoma Park, in particular in my ward, to shape and create the community we want together.
Thank you. And in Ward 2, we have incumbent Colleen Clay running for another term.
Hi. I initially ran for office because my neighbors asked me to. When I first ran, I was serving as the SOSCA president, and a seat came open, and I was approached by a lot of neighbors who said that they really appreciated the work that I had been doing with SOSCA and wanted me to represent them in the city. I'm running for re-election because I really love the work that I do as a city council person. People frequently ask me, why I'm running for office, and the answer is always really the same. It's that I love helping people solve their neighborhood problems. I love helping people build their neighborhood community, and I like providing that service. I'm a city planner by trade, a community development planner, and I really see what a great place Takoma Park is, and I look at some of the things that I think we need to do to protect the community that we have now and to build that community for the future. And it's another motivation for me running for office. I learned a lot in the first 2 years that I was in office. One of the things that I learned was that we had a lot of priorities as council for the 2 years that I was there. A lot of things going on, and I'm hoping in the couple of years to come that we're able to focus a little bit more on some of the things that are more neighborhood-related issues and some of our youth and family issues that we have in the community so that we can strengthen what we have to move forward in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Clay. In Ward 3, we have a contested race, which is the only contested race this year, and we have 2 new candidates running for office, and the first we'll hear from is Bridget Bowers.
Good evening. I bet a lot of people are wondering why I'm running. Kind of came out of the woodwork a little bit. I got involved this summer discussing rent control with the City Council and didn't really feel like my voice was being heard. And I didn't really feel like the issue was being examined from all sides, which I think is critical in determining long-term consequences to short-term actions. So, in short, I kind of think that the council is in need of some fresh perspectives. I think I'm new to the scene and I'm not kind of bogged down in the political mire, so I bring kind of creative ideas and enhanced strategies. I also believe that the City Council needs to diversify its membership to reflect the city that it serves. As such, with Joy Austin Lane and with Kathy Porter stepping down, I really think we need another woman on the council, and eventually I'd like to see even more diversity on the council. I really want Takoma Park to be my home for a long time to come. I want to have children here, given this value-laden community. And in short, I'm really a resident who's concerned enough to stand up and take a shot at council. Thank you.
Thank you. Also running in Ward 3 is Dan Robinson. Why don't you tell us a little bit about why you're running?
Okay. I have a little canned paragraph, and then I'll see if I can verge off into something ad hoc. Community building comes naturally to me. I enjoy it, and I've been doing it since I moved to Takoma Park in 1985. I raised a family here with my spouse, 2 daughters, and going through all the local schools and getting involved in lots of things. And I've built a lot of relationships, and I have a lot of experience in our city government through committee work, and also in the private sector. I've started a couple of businesses in town, and now I'm ready to help shape our community from the council. I think over the next few minutes I'll talk more about that committee work, but right now I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. Thank you. In Ward 4, Terry Siemens is returning for another 2 years. What is it that motivates you to run for council?
Well, as always, it's an honor for me to run for the City Council. My wife Joyce and I find meaning and fulfillment in service to others. I'll continue to work passionately for the community to improve our neighborhood and city. I'm humbled and encouraged by the progress we've made since I first joined the council in 1999. The council has instilled better management in our city government. I'm highly motivated to work with my colleagues to build on the momentum and success so your government will continue to serve you more effectively. For my next term, my priority will be fiscal responsibility. We need a new budget process, and I will work with the new mayor and council to improve the information the council has available when setting the budget, provide more time for budget cycle, search for bookkeeping changes that will result in better information for the council, explore other changes to give the council better control of city spending. In addition to more careful spending controls, I will work with the council in our continuing quest for a more fair rebate process. Takoma Park is in Montgomery County, and city residents pay county taxes at the same rate as our neighbors. The county should provide us with the same level of service or give us a fair rebate. A fair rebate system will produce tax savings for city residents. Over the past year and a half, the Takoma Park Community Action Group has accomplished many important steps towards a stronger and safer community. I will continue to support this important community organization as they strive to empower Ward 4 residents and help each other attain a higher level of self-sufficiency. The community survey completed by the Takoma Park Community Action Group earlier this year shows the biggest neighborhood concern is the many young people in our neighborhood without adequate recreational and educational programs. I will continue working to bring those programs to the community. Along this line, we cannot fail our youth by dismissing our need for a gymnasium. This remains one of my priorities, and I will continue to focus on a gym as we plan our future expenditures. I strongly believe we can provide the needed gym programs without significantly increasing taxes. Finally, Ward 4 residents are highly dependent on public transportation. I will continue working with the community to insist that Takoma Park Metro development plans adequately address current and future transit needs. Joyce and I are pleased we've been asked to serve our neighbors. I look forward to re-election as the Ward 4 representative on the City Council. Serving the people is my value. Thank you.
Thank you. In Ward 5, we had a special election this past year, or the year before. And
January.
Okay, so this year. And Reuben Snipper won that election, and he's back for more pain, running for the seat in this election.
Thank you, Eric. The first thing I want to say is I love Takoma Park, and one of the treats I've had is discovering what an honor and a privilege it is to be a city council member here in the city. I have I've lived here for 20 years, and I've appreciated the activism, the diversity, the sense of community of Takoma Park, and have worked, as others have too on this council, worked in various community organizations on issues we'll talk about in a few minutes. And people, what I discovered about my ward, and it's true about it elsewhere in Takoma Park, and it is the thing I really enjoy about it, is Takoma Park is full of knowledgeable, really active, and passionate people. They're passionate about their lives. They're passionate about several issues, and it's a pleasure to represent them. It has made my 6 months, or whatever it is, I guess it's 6 months since January, in office a pleasure. When I need to figure something out, I walk to my neighbors, and they will tell me. It's just a delight to represent them. And in fact, I have a confession. All of my best ideas I've stolen from my constituents. And the things I would like to work on, Terry has made a relatively short list, but my constituents are ready for more. They want to see the tax duplication issue addressed as soon as possible, if not sooner. They strongly support affordable housing, and we're delighted that we were able to preserve that a few months ago. They are strongly supportive of environmental efforts, particularly Sligo Creek, and we'll talk about that more. They're very concerned about the hospital moving, and are convinced, many of them are convinced that we need to push very hard to keep the hospital here in some version or other. They're also very concerned about the youth in the ward. Ward 5 is pretty far away from the community center. It's hard for our youth to get down to the community center. I've talked about, getting the new bus we bought to pick kids up and take them down to the community center. And that raises the other issues relating to traffic and bus service in general, and I, like Terry, I'm going to work very hard on improving that. And the last issue is one that I don't actually hear that often, but it is still a relevant concern, and that's personal safety issues. And it's fairly broad because it concerns both crime-type issues and being able to walk on sidewalks without getting, hit by cars as they go by. So it is a little bit related to the traffic thing, and I assume we'll talk about all these issues as the evening progresses. Thank you.
Thank you. And last but not least, we have a several-term incumbent running again for office in Ward 6, Doug Berry.
Thank you very much, Eric. Colleagues, potential new colleagues, Mayor Porter, City Attorney Silber, and Honorable Wife Liz Eater. Do I still have any time left? Takoma Park is a place with a purpose. It embraces and practices important progressive values. It gets involved in all kinds of major issues of the day, both large and small. It is a very welcoming and inclusive place, and for that reason, it's a great place to live, and of course, it's a great place to serve. And we've certainly had our share of big issues during the past year, and no doubt there'll be more in the future. Some that we have worked on and struggled with include resolutions in favor of same-sex marriage, impeaching the president and vice president, rights for chickens, also very important, preservation of affordable housing. These are just a few of the things that we have worked on, and we've not always been successful. in our point of view, but at least we've fought the good fight, and we will continue to do so. And there's some very big issues that I want to continue working on as I've been working on them for the past 4 years. And there are things like redevelopment and development, particularly on the Ward 6 part of town, the New Hampshire corridor. A wonderful part of town, a great melting pot, people all over the world. But it has a lot of problems, and the city has shown a leadership role in helping bring those to the fore. And I'm happy to tell you tonight that there's been a lot of progress, and there's more to come. And that's what I want to work on over the next couple of years, is making sure that those things that need to happen do so. And there are other big issues like crime and public safety. We have to keep our eye on the ball on that one, because I think we are threatened by an ever-changing area around us, and we have to focus particularly on the prevention side and the coordination with other jurisdictions. And then, of course, there is the funding part. Where's money going to come to continue the things that we do and to help protect this progressive core that we have? This is going to be a very big issue, and we'll be working hard on that. Now, is this all pie in the sky, or on our side of town, papusa in the sky? No, I don't think so. I think with a lot of hard work, we're going to show people why this community is so special, and it will be a great privilege to come back for another 2 years and to serve all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank all of you for introducing yourselves and your ideas. In the past, when I've run forums, I guess it's been about 15 years I've been doing this, generally we run a much more formal type of a forum, and we have a little clock timer up here, and I buzz people if they run over. And this year, we have, I think it's a unique situation since I've been doing it, which is that we have only one contested race, which is the Ward 3 race, obviously. So I thought that it was only fair that we heard a little bit from all of these other people who are running for office and don't have any apparent opponent. I mean, there's always the possibility of a massive write-in campaign. But hear from those of you who have been on the council, those of you who want to be on the council, who are running unopposed, and also hear from the two candidates who are running a contested race. So with that in mind, I'm going to try doing something that maybe veers a little bit more towards the idea of a conversation. Now, of course, it's not quite exactly a conversation. We're sitting up here on a dais with mics in front of us and so forth. But nevertheless, I think we can talk about some of the ideas of the city and why, what different plans are, different ideas for accomplishing the goals that you all set forth. Having said that, I'd actually like to ask our mayoral candidate, Bruce Williams, the first question, which is simply, given that we have just the one contested race, and given that, generally speaking, we don't get a lot of voter turnout in city elections anyway, what can you say to motivate voters outside of Ward 3 to come out and cast their vote for you?
I think that I'd like people to vote because it's important to hear what people have to say about the important issues in the city. And I think in addition to us as candidates going out and campaigning and talking to folks in your neighborhoods, it's also important for you to come and talk to us. And one of the big opportunities to do that is Election Day, because all the candidates are always here all day during Election Day. And it's a great opportunity to talk about whatever is on your mind as you come and cast your vote. And it's really important to cast that vote, because then we know that people are listening and care, and that we have to pay particular attention to the concerns that we hear about, because as people are engaged and work with all of the various issues that we deal with and that are important to you, and it's a balancing act among those issues. And sometimes there's some trade-offs, and if you're going to do one thing, you may not be able to do another thing. And to hear those kind of issues and have those nuanced conversations on Election Day and after Election Day is really important. So it's important for everybody to come out and vote and talk to all of us while you come and vote.
Thank you. Anybody else on the panel care to add anything to what our mayoral candidate has said?
I would just add that, I'm advocating that we focus on 5 things in particular for Ward 1. Safety, including crime and safe roadways. Community-driven development that is connected to the small town and historic feel of Takoma Park. Effective and efficient government. I think we have a staff that works very hard in the city government, but I think that we're not always consistent in how we respond to people. I think we need to have progressive ideas that work around pragmatically addressing issues like the environment in ways that other communities can follow. And I also think probably the most important thing is addressing the tax duplication issues. So I would say people going to the polls and voting clearly says that they agree that those are the things we need to focus on as a city. And it'll help me, but I think also help candidates in every ward and the mayor get a sense that what they're advocating for is the thing that people truly want.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to respond to that question?
Yes, just very briefly, and maybe for different reasons. If you love your city, come out and vote. If you love the person that, or you like the way the trash is picked up, come out and vote. If you like the police in the numbers that you see them and you feel protected by them and well served by them, come out to vote. If you like your neighbor, come out to vote. If you don't like your neighbor and wish they behaved a little differently, come out to vote.
Thank you, Eric. I'll just repeat what I've said in previous elections for my Ward 4 constituents, is that participating in the community is empowerment of the community. And it's very important, and it's the one time of the 2-year cycle that residents can have the biggest impact on this council, and that is by turning out to vote and showing the entire community that this neighborhood in Ward 4 is interested in the city and interested in what happens in this city. The higher the voter turnout in this ward, the higher the voice, the bigger the voice is of this ward.
Thank you. Okay. I'd like to, oh, yes.
I'll say something on this topic.
Okay.
This topic is near and dear to me. The question is, do we have enough opportunities? Do citizens have enough opportunities for decision making? And I think that, now, I'm not on the council, so I'm still running for council, so I think I'm in a different situation than the rest of you, so I'll try to work this into a discussion. One contested race every 2 years tells me we aren't giving our citizens enough opportunities to decide on things. Now, of course, we all have the opportunity to go out and talk with them, but there are some structural things that we could do, too. One is we could put items on the ballot. The council can put items on the ballot. In Montgomery County, there are often items on the ballot for citizens to decide, but that doesn't happen here. Okay? Bridget, in an earlier flyer, said that she wanted to see term limits, and I think that if term limits came up on the council, and I'm taking a guess here, but I think if it came up, it would have a hard time passing. Just call it intuition. But if it were on the ballot, and people said, yes, we want term limits, or no, we don't want term limits, that would be an instance where citizens could decide. Now, I'm not saying I think that's a great idea, but I do think that there are other opportunities for us to put items on the ballot or give citizens more opportunity to make a decision.
Thank you. Any other thoughts on this issue? I'd like to turn, actually, thank all of you for your response. I'd like to turn to another issue that seems to come up every year. In fact, it doesn't seem to come up every year. It comes up every year. In fact, it comes up with great frequency, and that is the issue of rent stabilization. And Ms. Bowers, you mentioned this in your opening statement, and I thought that was a good place to start. if you take a look at the census from 2000, you see that rents in Takoma Park were significantly lower than rents outside of Takoma Park by at least $200, and I believe that that gulf has grown. So Takoma Park has done a better job than most of our neighboring jurisdictions in terms of keeping housing affordable. And I guess I'd like to hear a little bit more about, from you, first of all, your thoughts about maybe some problems with the way rent stabilization is run in our community.
Absolutely. When I was speaking this summer at City Council meetings, I was specifically speaking out against the elimination of the capital improvement petition. The capital improvement petition allowed for landlords to pass on some of the major costs to their tenants, such as a new roof, new driveway, etc. My concern with the elimination of the capital improvement petition was that this would lead to dilapidated buildings, which is not great for community members and also just not fair to tenants as well. So that's what I was specifically speaking about. And, you know, I guess I'm very in favor of affordable housing. I think if, you know, this is the only option, then we should go with that, but I'm not convinced that this is the only or the best option. Tenants don't need to qualify for affordable housing, and I think in general it may be a long-term consequence that people are not renting and converting their apartments into condominiums or into single-family homes if they have a home that's divided. So that actually shrinks the amount of affordable housing that's on the market, which is kind of shooting yourself in the foot if we're trying to expand that base.
Thank you very much. And I guess I'd like to hear next from Mr. Robinson. What are your thoughts on the way we run rent stabilization and maybe concerns that you might have about affordable housing in our community?
I think I'll approach this from the point of view of business, local business and small business, because landlords are business people, and I'm a promoter of small business people. I am one myself, and I've spent a lot of time in that thinking about that and working towards making small businesses more successful. So that's what I'd like to see. There are some big apartment buildings in town. There are some instances where big apartment buildings are run properly by entities that are specifically, their specific focus is to run large buildings with lower income people in mind. The Montgomery Housing Partnership is an example. They operate the Edinburgh right across the street, and they provide a good deal of low income housing there in a quality way. So I think that's a good way to approach large buildings. There are a lot of small buildings and medium buildings, and those to me are small businesses for real, and a lot of them are local small businesses, and I'd like to promote their efficient use and good relationships with tenants. But if we manipulate the market, that means that the city's now in a kind of a business relationship with those small business people, and I don't know enough about how that works, and I'm looking forward to learning more about that business relationship between the city and those small to medium-sized buildings, those small to medium-sized businesses. And there's one thing that I am familiar with, and that is accessory apartments. I am in an unusual situation because my spouse and I own our house with a friend, and that friend owns a separate unit in the building, and she moved out for personal reasons a good while ago, and has rented her legal accessory apartment to a variety of tenants who many of whom we've enjoyed having as neighbors. I won't go on. I kept the beginning short, right? So now I'm rambling a little bit here. But accessory apartments provide housing for low-income people. They help people, single-family homeowners, by helping subsidize their costs, and costs for a single-family home in this town can be large. The tax costs are substantial. So if I'd like to see the numbers. How many accessory apartments do we have right now? What if we doubled that number? How many more? Or what if we tripled it? Or what's a reasonable percentage? How much more affordable housing can we provide ourselves with our own housing stock.
Okay, thank you. And for clarity's sake, let me just come back with a follow-up. What is your opinion about our rent stabilization law as it now stands? Is it something that you think is successful, needs improvement, needs more study?
Well, as Bridget intimated, it's not needs-based. So if you have a building that's under rent control or rent stabilization, anyone can move in, and so I think that there's a flaw there in that people who need that subsidy aren't necessarily getting it, and people who are in those buildings aren't necessarily needing that subsidy. So to me, that's a serious flaw that needs to be addressed.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Bowers, I'd like to give you a chance to respond if you have any other ideas on this issue.
We're asking each other questions here, or just responding to your main
Well,
question?
I guess responding to what Mr. Robinson said about affordable housing, and if you feel that you differ in some way from his position.
I mean, I think that what we both have in common is that we are very in favor of local entrepreneurs. That's definitely what we have in common. I guess my question would be kind of in terms of the accessory apartments, if you had any thoughts on how you would encourage other people to, have accessory apartments and utilize that as an option for affordable housing.
Okay. Wow. What comes to mind is the Piney Branch pool, which wasn't used very well by the community because there wasn't a lot of outreach to tell people that it was there, that it was a resource. And accessory apartments are, I guess, in a similar situation. People need to know that they're a good option.
We have exactly, Mr. Snipper.
Hi, thank you. I actually thought as I indicated earlier, that the rent stabilization changes we made this summer were really quite good. I'm very much in favor of them. I think that the fair return petition, while it is not the same as the capital improvements, and the capital improvements petition has been eliminated, I think that many more landlords will be able to make use of the fair return petition than were able to make use of the capital improvements petition. I do want to say one thing that has struck me is about Takoma Park is that we make a lot of efforts on behalf of the tenants. There are a lot of classes and support. There's a lot of information that's available that's given to tenants. I believe that the city should make more of an effort to help landlords succeed, because I very much want landlords to succeed. I have my interest is not that landlords fail and therefore sell their properties. It'll be hard to get a fair price if they fail. It would also mean that many of those places, particularly the smaller ones, will convert to condos, or they'll convert to single-family homes, and we'll lose affordable housing, just as we were talking. I do note that the condo conversion rate is no higher in Takoma Park than in the rest of Montgomery County. But I think the city should, in fact, do more education to help landlords succeed, prepare materials, give classes, support them in that. And I also think one of the things that the council promised landlords was to do a utility cost study, because utilities have really spiked, and it has hurt a lot of landlords. And the city promised to do that, and I hope we can move forward with that study. Delaying it serves no purpose really at all. By the time, you don't want it to drag on. So I would really like to see that push forward, because I think it would be valuable to the landlords and would be fair to the tenants as well.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, Mr. Stevens.
Thank you. I'm really pleased with the Takoma Park's dedication to affordable housing. I think what we've heard from others tonight, that we are more successful at keeping more affordable housing in Takoma Park than in any other areas in Montgomery County and even in the region. I'm glad that this year we improved our law so that it is more fair to everyone involved. I think it's a difficult thing when there are competing interests, and certainly there is some competition and interest between landlords and tenants. But I think that right now the best approach for maintaining affordable housing is our current law. I'm certainly interested in exploring other possibilities if someone wants to bring something forward. But I think at this point, the rent control as we have it today is the best solution to make sure that we can continue to have an economic mix of residents within our city.
Thank you. Mr. Berry?
Yes, I'd like to see us focus on a couple of other things. And while certainly, on the one hand, I feel that we have, in the past year, tried to strike, and have been somewhat successful in striking, a very difficult balance between the need to supply the affordable housing and the need for landlords to make a fair return. We will continue looking at the law. If there are unintended consequences because of the changes that we have made, you can be sure we will revisit it again and make sure that those are addressed. But I really think that in the future, the solution may lie in increasing the amount of affordable housing stock in the area. There are places that are ripe for redevelopment, one of which is the New Hampshire corridor. Adding to that would be the importance of the density of those developments. If you have a dense development, but yet at the same time are mindful of the traffic requirements and the need for open spaces, you can produce more units per square mile, for example, than you could if you don't have density. We see now at the Takoma transit development that is not a dense development. It's not very many units at all for the amount of land that's available there. Then the third area I think to explore and be more aggressive in would be some state and federal assistance to the problem. I think we need to engage the federal government in particular that would provide more loans and grants and incentives, and then I think you'll see the number of units in the area for affordable housing increase.
Great, thank you. Any other thoughts? Yes, Ms. Clay?
Well, I've talked a lot about rent control and my thoughts about rent control and affordable housing, but you know, I hear the other council members talking about what a good job we've done with affordable housing, and I think that we're forgetting that this is really just limited to affordable rental housing, and we're not talking about home ownership. But before I move on to the home ownership side of it, I want to say that, you know, I've spent the last 5 years working in the housing field for a national level agency, and the city conducted a affordable housing forum, which is one of the things I wanted to do when I got elected, and the mayor helped with it, and Terry Siemens was a participant, and Joy Austin Lane, and pulling it all together. And we had a lot of different ideas about things that we could do for affordable housing. Community land trust, using low-income housing tax credit, packages, different things like that. And after that, the council spent, I think, 18 months talking about the very narrow slice of tools that we have to address affordable housing, that is rent control. And in the end, I'm not sure how well the changes that we passed are going to function in terms of protecting the affordable housing stock in the way that people talk about it. It's pretty complex. I understand that our staff are still calling the lawyer who helped to write the law to get interpretations, and at some point, you know, that's going to have to be passed off to our staff, and it's going to have to be a functional, usable law that we can understand, that's accessible to everybody. And I think what we have right now is so complex that there's a lack of understanding of how it's going to operate. And I sat up here through all of those presentations, and I didn't hear a single landlord speak in favor of it, but I really didn't hear tenants come and speak in favor of it as well. And one of the things that I was talking about earlier when I was talking about making some changes to how we do affordable housing policy is to be careful to protect the people that we have now in the housing and under the existing affordable housing law. So I guess I'm a little bit worried about how the changes are actually going to affect the people that we're trying to help, because, I personally have a hard time understanding them, and I have a master's degree in community development planning, so I'm a little bit worried about that. But let me get the other side of it. We're not talking very much about affordable housing, and I think affordable housing in terms of home ownership housing. And we do talk a lot, though, about wanting to preserve the progressive values of our community and make a place for the people who are here and make a place for all kinds of different people to live in the community. And I think given the rise in housing values and the rise in taxes that comes along with that, that's changing. And people talk about that actively in Ward 2. I don't know how much they talk about it in the other wards, but they talk about it pretty actively in Ward 2 about how that's changing. When I came here, we had some friends that moved here from Berkeley, and we lived in the Berkeley-Oakland area in California. And they said, Takoma Park is a great place to live because you can come here and you don't both have to work full-time to afford a house and to afford a way of life. And so because of that, it gives you the opportunity to go out and participate in your community in a way that hasn't been the case for a long time, since, the 60s and 70s when, I had a stay-at-home mom. And so you can't capture all of that, but you can capture some of it. So you can both have a career and you can have this time to work in the community and invest in your community. And I think that's one of the things that's under threat with the structure of the way that we approach affordable housing. And so what I would like us to do as we move forward with affordable housing in the future is really to go back to that broader question of what it is we're trying to accomplish and for whom we're trying to accomplish, so that we can look at the different impacts of all of these different things. I mean, we definitely have depressed property values for our rental housing stock. One of the landlords came and said, well, actually a real estate agent that came and said, the cheapest single-family housing in Takoma Park is a 3-unit rental property. And that's happening. And I think we're going to get our referendum on our rent control and affordable housing. We're going to get it when the 2010 census numbers come out that tell us how many of our 6,700 housing units are still rental housing. I'd like to know where the figures are coming from that the condo conversion rate in Takoma Park is not any different than the county rate. And then I would also like to be able to compare that not only to units that are being converted, but to units that are just being lost because they're not being rented or they're being consolidated into other things. And I want to also say, people have said a lot of things about my stand on rent control. And I, for a long time, said that I would never change rent control for the people who are currently protected under that, which doesn't mean that I'm not afraid to take a different approach, though, as we look and see how the world around us is changing relative to the tools that we have been using to provide and preserve affordable housing.
Great. You hit on a couple of issues that I think we want to get back to, and so particularly how the housing market has affected homeowners in Takoma Park and what responsibility the council has. But before we move on to that, I'd like to hear from Bruce and Josh if they have any thoughts on this issue of rent stabilization.
Sure. I spoke twice at the council meeting when they were talking about changing the code for rent stabilization. And the question I asked myself is, what are we committed to start with? And I think broadly across Takoma Park, we're very committed to a diverse community, economically diverse community, and that requires affordable housing. So I think we're all committed to affordable housing. I do have concerns about how rent control provides affordable housing for people. And I'm similar to Colleen in the perspective that I would not step away or vote against rent control until we had viable alternatives in place, viable alternatives for rental housing and viable alternatives for home ownership. And I think there are models out there across the country of different ways to provide affordable housing. And we need to take some time to examine those different models, see which ones are successful, and see which ones will fit with a city of Takoma Park size, which won't be an administrative burden on the limited city staff we have. The one issue that I would add to affordability, which I don't think has been discussed in detail, is that we have a lot of people who have lived in Takoma Park for a long time, and they bought their houses when they were much less expensive, and property values have gone up considerably. In my ward, I've talked to a fair number of people who are now at or nearing retirement age, and they're looking at fixed income either now or in the future. And so I think we also need to do more to provide affordability to those in place. And I don't think we can say, well, just go get a reverse mortgage. I think we need to look at expanding the tax credit for seniors as well as people on fixed income or low income people who are proud homeowners in Takoma Park. So.
Thank you.
A lot has been said about this, so I don't want to go through a whole bunch of it, but I do want to say that in general, I agree with the points that in particular Colleen and Josh made about having the ability to look at some other models for providing affordable housing, for rental housing. I'm not convinced that rent stabilization is the best way to go because it's not targeted based on need. And I think that there have to be some other models out there that we can look at and see what we could do with them. I'm not sure what they are, but I would love to be able to find out what they are. Some people have talked to me about some models in Cambridge, Massachusetts that might be worth looking at. And then for affordable owner-occupied housing, I think that, as Josh said, that's becoming an issue more and more as property values go up, and it makes it just a whole lot harder for people who have been here for a long time to afford what they didn't buy into when they bought here. And it's also hard for new folks who don't have the built-in protection that the state of Maryland provides with the 10% cap on assessments. Those of us who have lived here for a long time have a little bit of comfort that our assessments don't go up more than 10% a year in the kind of market that we've been experiencing lately. But folks who have bought here in the last couple of years don't have that cap. And for that same house worth the same amount of money as the folks who have been here a long time, they're paying, in some cases, near double what we're paying who have been here a long time. So when they scream about higher taxes, they really are a lot higher than those of us who have been here for a long time are experiencing. So I think that we on the council have to pay particular attention to holding the costs down of city government, but it's that mix of providing community that a local government can really help foster in a place like this, and that comes with costs, and that's when it gets back over into what are we getting as rebate from the county, and how do we work the kind of money that we can get from the state to augment and supplant what would otherwise have to be paid by taxes. And in a town like ours with mostly residential tax base, not commercial, it falls to homeowners and building owners of multifamily properties, and therefore to rents to pay for all of that. So part of the affordable housing mix is to make sure that we get the most bang for our buck for our tax dollars for the services that we need the most.
Thank you. And actually, that's exactly where I'd like to go with our next question. And I think that it was interesting to hear Ms. Clay kind of spin out the many different issues that come from the housing boom and how it's affected Takoma Park. Many people moved here because of the affordable single-family homes, and at this point, it's often that I hear people say I can never afford to move here if I didn't already have a house here, for example. And then the other thing I hear quite frequently is that do we really need a city, or do we need such a big city? Because so much of our money is going out in tax assessments every year to, and maybe we're not really getting the services that we want for all the money that we're spending by living in Takoma Park. If we just crossed the line to Silver Spring, we'd be paying less in taxes. So I guess I'd like to hear what thoughts you have about ways that the city could either help lower tax bills and/or get more for our money from the county. So why don't we start with you, Bruce?
Well, the first part of it is using the tax dollars that we have the most wisely and looking at the services that we provide and seeing if there are ways that we can provide them better, maybe with less cost. I think one of the possible areas to do that might be in the kinds of programs that go on in this building and in other facilities that the city has, recreation programs and community programs, that I think there's an opportunity for more volunteer efforts to put them forward, relationships with community organizations. It may lead to some savings in our expenditures on recreation. I'm not sure, but I'd like to have that discussion and look into that, see how that works. I think in some other areas it can be harder to find savings because I think a lot of people want the kinds of expenditures that the city has to make in order to get what it is that is so important here, and I think that's particularly the case in community development, economic development, putting on various things that go on in the city, but also the planning staff that deals with things like the Takoma Metro Station. I think people find it really valuable that we have such a great staff who works on those kind of issues and helps foster the power that we have that our neighbors in unincorporated Montgomery County don't have, and that in many cases our neighbors in the District of Columbia don't have. As we work with them on those issues, they see how valuable it is to have a small, focused government working on issues that are closest to the people and can really make a difference. So I think that's one side of it, where it's that balance of how we use our resources. And the other side, as we've started to talk about, is rebates that we get from the county. I think it's about 18% of Montgomery County lives in municipalities. It's getting toward 1 million people in Montgomery County. For the 18% who live in municipalities, the amount that the county rebates to all municipalities for the services that those municipalities provide is about $6 million. And when you think about the size of the county budget and the proportion that the people in these municipalities represent, $6 million is a pittance. And if the county is really behind the philosophy of the rebate, of providing the services rebating the services that the municipality provides, that figure would be a whole lot more than $6 million. Takoma Park gets $3 million of the $6 million. So there's a whole lot of services that we're providing that the tax duplication formula should be rebating us from the county. We've been working on that. There's a work group that's been put together that is supposed to be coming back with recommendations. That's a county municipal work group that's supposed to be coming back, I think, in December. The Montgomery County chapter of Maryland Municipal League, which I'm the vice president of, has put that issue front and center to deal with rebates. Some of our colleagues who haven't been quite so worried about rebates before, Rockville and Gaithersburg, are much more engaged. They see Rockville and Gaithersburg provide police protection, but not first due independent department like ours. They get zip for police. They are essentially providing first due service for their residents. They get nothing. It's also becoming an issue statewide. We've been working, and Mayor Porter has provided a lot of leadership on this statewide to try and get all of the municipalities, 157 in the state, to work on this issue. The difficulty there is that a lot of those municipalities are in counties that don't even have the ability to get any rebate. Their counties, there's kind of two categories of municipalities in the state, and a lot of those municipalities in those counties get nothing. So we're working statewide to try and get it so that all of the counties are what they call shall counties, where they shall give a rebate. There shall be those discussions. And once we get those municipalities on board so that their counties are in the same position, we can all work for the same thing to try and get a much fairer rebate. And if we do, I think we'll have a lot better financial picture.
Thanks. I'm wondering if any other candidates are interested in sharing their thoughts on strategies for achieving more of a rebate from the county, and or strategies for cutting services or cutting budgets so that the tax bill is less onerous for homeowners. Any thoughts? Okay.
Down the line.
So I would add a few things to Bruce's point. I think some of this is really a political battle, and I think we are going to need to exert a fair bit of pressure at the county level in a political way. First, behind the scenes, along with Rockville and Gaithersburg. When it comes to county elections, Takoma Park votes at a very high percentage. And I think we need to make that clear. I would also say that I would consider, from a political pressure standpoint, that just like other issues, we get out vocally, we turn voters out to have their voices heard. I would suggest that might be necessary to go to county council meetings with large numbers of people from Takoma Park and express their concern. And then lastly, I would actually be an advocate of looking into what our legal options are. I'm not a lawyer, but I would like to have from a lawyer who has dealt with these issues what our legal options are. Do we have the legal standing to potentially have a lawsuit around this? Because the state law says they shall rebate us, and I think it's at the level it would cost them to provide the service. And I would really want to know what those options are as a potential plan B if the county doesn't resolve the issue in a more favorable way. I think also we have an opportunity to increase revenue connected to economic development. Doug talked a bit about the New Hampshire corridor, and I think we do have a great opportunity there to do some economic development. I think that our staff here at the city works very hard on economic development issues, and the county has a very large economic development staff and does very little for us on that front. So I think we should request and push for some services from the Economic Development Department at the county level to work closely with our city departments to increase the economic development here in Takoma Park, mainly along New Hampshire Avenue corridor. But I also think there's sites in Old Town that could benefit from some refurbishment, and there's some infill development that would be helpful. And all of that helps to put a dent in the tax issue. I think if you do the math, it takes quite a bit of development to significantly change the tax picture, but I think every little bit can help, and so I would advocate for that. I think the question that I hear Eric asking is, what would you propose be cut from the city budget on the cost side? And to me, there's no golden eggs there, but I also, as I've gone around and talked to constituents, I find it very hard to find any one thing that I would really advocate for cutting. Do you want to cut the police department? I think pretty quickly if we cut the police department or we gave it back to the county, we'd be in a lot worse situation. The library is another one. If we give that back to the county, they say that they would basically close it. Do we want to close the library here in Takoma Park? I'm sure there's a few advocates for that, but I think generally across the board, if you talk to people, what the library provides to our children, what it provides to lower-income people who don't have access to transportation or computers, and the opportunity to be able to walk to the library and use that facility to search for jobs and do research on things is, I think, critical to what Takoma Park is. So I find it very hard to identify things that we would necessarily say we would cut. I think recreation is an area where we could do a better job. I don't know enough on the details to say that I think we can actually do that with less money.
Thank you.
Well, definitely the library and the recreation department are the kind of two big ticket items that we don't really get any significant rebates for. But I've said before that those are also, core to Takoma Park's identity. The other items that we have in the city, people talk about public works, but there wouldn't really be any significant savings there. And I do believe that the police department, that we need to have our own police department. I came to be more and more convinced of that as I was running for office. I wasn't, when I was first running the first time, wasn't looking to do anything other than provide pay parity for the police, which happened, and now we have a fully staffed police department, which we didn't have when I was running for office last time. I think it's made a huge difference. We have a new police chief and a different attitude, and I think you can see the differences there. I want to say that there was a comment about term limits earlier and whether or not you would, a councilperson would submit term limits. And I've never been an advocate for term limits, even when I wasn't in office, because I think what you lose is the long-term relationships that people build up, that the council members build up. And 2 years ago when we were sitting here, there was a very interesting exchange going on between the two mayoral candidates. And I was listening, and one candidate was saying that they had lots and lots of relationships with people at the county level, at the state level, and it made a difference when you wanted to get something done, especially around the rebates issue. And the other person was saying, well, those are the relationships of the mayor, and they don't go with the person. But clearly, watching what has gone on over the last 2 years, the fact that we have had both Kathy Porter and Bruce Williams, and for a while we had Mark Elrich, but these folks that had really long-term relationships with folks because they had been in office for a long time. They could call up people that, people who had only been on the council for, well, we could call them, but they wouldn't really get the same response that Kathy Porter or Bruce Williams calling gets. And I think that building those relationships over the long term is what's really going to make a difference in how well we fare to some extent in this process. And, I'm watching the other council members get engaged and build those relationships. I'm looking kind of down this way because those are the folks down there, that I've been watching and how they've been doing that and getting engaged, and I've been doing the same thing so that we could have those kinds of relationships for the long term to affect change. At the basic level, though, the structure of Maryland is set up so that it's not encouraging to a city to set up a local government that's anything more than kind of a government in name only. I had this great conversation with Kathy Porter one day. We were talking about the structure of municipal government. I didn't grow up in Maryland, so I've had to learn a lot of that as an adult. You don't get the advantage of years and years. And she said, only 15% of the people who live in the state live in cities. And that just, as a city planner, just blew my mind because structurally people come to the cities. It's where the high service areas are, but this is an urban service area. So I think there's a structural disconnect between what we want to see for ourselves as a city and how the state of Maryland is set up to support municipalities. And then we have a structural disconnect between us and the other municipalities because when you become a city, you don't capture any tax rate except 17% of the income tax. So that encourages someone to set up a city so that they can collect the 17% and have this, very light government and not actually provide any services, provide a community identity. And so those folks who have set up cities like that aren't really big on the tax rebate bandwagon because there's nothing that they are really looking for a tax rebate for because they're not providing services. And it's also the disincentive for the county to allow new municipalities, which we just saw with the, what's the name of it, Rollingwood. They don't want to give up the 17%. And Rollingwood, some of the folks there were talking about just rolling the 17% back as a tax rebate. And so that sets up this structure where there's only some things that we can actually get tax rebates for, and so we have to be very careful and guarded what we pick up as activities to see that the activities that we actually do pick up are rebatable activities. And if you sit on the council now, you hear that discussion going on. We had a conversation, one of the council members wanted a mere $10,000 for more food services support. And the conversation quickly turned to the fact that that was a social service. It wasn't paid out of property taxes and therefore was not rebatable to the city. It's unfortunate because the structure of how the tax stream flows then determines what kinds of services a city provides, where it should really be the other way around. We should be determining what kind of city services we provide as a city based on what it makes sense for us to provide. And in some instances, it makes sense for us to provide some of those local level social services. We know the people, we know what they need. most. It doesn't make sense for us to provide like transportation, or I would argue even affordable housing, although we're working on that issue, is really in all other parts of the country is a regional issue. It's very hard to site affordable housing. It takes a lot of money to pull it together, but we don't get that kind of support here. And that's one of the reasons why I was also interested in development in the New Hampshire corridor. We had the New Hampshire Avenue, charrette. That's a long-term process, though. It's another one of those long-term processes, and I was really excited to see that the council is bringing it back in, talking about how we might do some of those charrettes for Old Town and for the Junction, and continue that so we can broaden our tax base through commercial development instead of raising our taxes on our homeowners and landlords.
Thank you. Ms. Fowler?
I'll make this kind of short. Kind of in terms of what we're going to cut from the budget, every year at work when I go into strategic planning, my boss is like, well, what's on our stop doing list? And the answer is inevitably not much, because once you provide service, people want the service. So I think it's tough, as everyone was indicating, which services are you going to cut off of this sheet. So I don't necessarily have a specific answer for that, but I think what we need to be doing is be more fiscally responsible and conservative from here on out, and make really strategic decisions on kind of where our money goes. So, someone had brought up the gym, which I think if the community needs it, that's great. But let's look at alternative ways of funding that project, whether it be through, corporate donations or some sort of fundraising program, et cetera. So, my short answer is kind of being fiscally conservative from here on out. And also, I don't know if we should. Term limits will come up later, or if I should respond to that just because...
Go ahead now.
Just because I think I brought that up.
I'm not sure that it is coming up again later.
Okay. I brought that up kind of on some of my platforms. And the reason I brought that up is, I agree with some of the points where you kind of have people roll off, and that institutional knowledge kind of goes with them. But I think there is kind of a way to kind of have the best of both worlds, where you have some term limits and you have those people roll off and be on a board of directors or whatever terminology you want to utilize, where you can capture that information and still encourage fresh perspectives on the council, and encourage other people, kind of force the hand for people to get involved. And that's it.
Great. Thank you very much. Dan, would you like to speak to the rebate issue?
Sure. I think you asked about what can we do for the city expenditures and then broader issues, and so I'll tackle the two in that order. And one of the things I'd like to see in Ward 3 is neighborhood associations and streets really working together so that they can understand the budget when budget time comes around. And I've noted over the years that when budget time comes around, there aren't that many people sitting in the audience, because it's just not a galvanizing kind of topic. And it's probably a risk in saying, oh, I'd like to take these issues out to the ward, to the neighborhood associations and streets, take such a non-galvanizing topic out there. But I think that to get people on board for the budget and to help make the decisions about what's an appropriate service and what's a valuable service and program, we really need to be more involved ward-wide, so that people are engaged at that time. So that's one thing I'd like to reach out to the wards on. And the other is our energy footprint. And I know that's not the topic right here, but if we can really tackle that issue, I think that can galvanize us as a whole city, and I hope the ward, because there's a lot of talent in town, people who know how to reduce our energy footprint. And I want to see that talent and intelligence used kind of house to house, and also in the government. That's not quite a way to cut the budget, but I think it's an overriding issue that is hard. It's easy to forget and hard to accomplish. As far as the big issue goes, I'll segue into that by saying that I was the co-chair of the Tax and Service Duplication Issue Committee, and I was proud to be that co-chair, and I think we did a good job. There were 21 people on the committee, and when we started, the general scuttlebutt was, this thing ain't going no place. There are too many people. But we did a good job. We chopped up, we divided up the city budget and departments in a way that, of those 21 people, there were 2 or 3 looking at each one. There was a lot of autonomy. I'm a delegator by nature, and I'm proud to say that we delegated our little brains out, Bruce Moyer and I, and we came back with a report, which is a solid report, which is our guide and the council's guide to the nitty-gritty, the little nuts and bolts things. It gives us talking points to go to the county, so I'm very happy to have done that. I'm thrilled that Bruce and Kathy and others on the council have started to reach out, have started to work their magic with their long relationships, and that can be something that's on the horizon over the next couple of years. And I'm really looking forward to working in that realm along with them, along with the council members on that topic. Our budget is now $20 million. One calculation we made in the Tax and Service Duplication Issues Committee was that we're being shortchanged $7 to $10 million per year. That's approaching half our budget. That is an outrage. So I know that it's a complicated formula of who do we talk to and what's the state's responsibility, but we had to go to the state and to the counties and really address this. What is fair taxation for cities, and what are appropriate municipal responsibilities? And until we do that, it's just we're just spinning our wheels. We have to approach that. So I have a few other things noted down as I was hearing others speak, but I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Mr. Stevens.
Thank you, Mr. Bond. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this. I think what we've heard tonight is it's worked its way down the table here. There's a lot of commonality in thoughts and opinions on this. I haven't heard a lot of varied opinions, a lot of arguing on this issue. But I think I'd just like to emphasize something that Ward 1 candidate Josh Wright said earlier, and that is that it's a complex issue, and I'm talking about the rebates. It's a complex issue, and it's something that needs a multifaceted approach. Part of it is political, and part of it is grassroots. I'll give you an example, and there are several examples that I'm aware of that we have tried to work on. But one easy example right now, all of you here live in Montgomery County. You all live in Takoma Park, probably. But as Montgomery County residents, you and I and every other Montgomery County resident have paid money to buy trees for planting along the streets. But when a Takoma Park resident calls and says, I want one of those trees planted along my street in my town in Takoma Park, we're told, no, you live in Takoma Park, you don't get any of those trees that we paid for, okay? That's the part of the rebate problem. And I think that part of the solution is that you and I and the rest of the community need to understand that our money is being used by other county residents to buy things for their community, improve their community, money that isn't being spent here in Takoma Park that we deserve. And I think as we can help people in the community understand the problem, and at the same time as we communicate those concerns to the county council members so that they understand the problem, and I really think it is, as we've heard, it's a complex issue. I don't think that all the county council members understand really the nuances of the problem. So I think education is a big part of it, and some of these simple little issues help to serve the community by educating us on what the issue is and educating the county council on what the problem is. And, in this particular example, we have gone to county council member and said, hey, what's the answer here? Why don't we get trees when we ask for them if you can provide them to residents right across Piney Branch Road that is outside of Takoma Park? It's going to be a long process. It's going to be a process that takes a lot of work, but I don't think it's that there's any quick answer or easy answer. I think it takes a dedicated effort by the council, but more importantly, or as importantly, by the people, because the people is where the power is. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Stipper, would you like to add anything?
Yes, thank you. I will try to keep it brief. My fellow council members, of course, I'm fairly new, so I've been glad to hear, I'll call it the wisdom of the council on this issue, because as Dan pointed out, this has been going on for a really long time. It's not a new issue. It is not a simple issue. It's not one that's going to be resolved quickly either, the issue of tax duplication. And I think people are working on, I think there's a lot of efforts underway now that could be supported that speak to this issue. There is, however, on that one thing I think that Terry started to talk about, and I thought he was actually going to take my point entirely, but he hasn't quite.
Is that when you kicked me?
No, I didn't kick you, but I should have maybe. I think Takoma Park should make use of the activists in the town to lobby on specific issues like the trees. I think the city and the council in particular could do a better job at making it extremely concrete. What are the things that we could work on, in the next 3 months that would improve things in Takoma Park? The tree thing is a classic example. Are there specific identifiable things that we could get our local citizens to write letters, make phone calls? A lot of people in Takoma Park have really good connections with people at the county and state level. We have our elected officials. We have a good crowd, good delegation. Now, a lot of folks from the Takoma Park area. So I think we could make better use of the activism, the activists in Takoma Park on this exact issue. The second thing I want to talk about, which you asked about, Eric, was are there things we can cut in the budget? And I agree with Bridget. When time comes, and your boss says, "So what can we cut?" Of course the answer is nothing. That's true under one kind of circumstance, and that's when you don't really know what is working and what is not working that well. What parts of the things you're doing are going well and what parts really aren't going that well. And you want to look at the ones that aren't going very well, and you can make two judgments. You can say, well, we really think it's an essential function, let's fix it up, make it work well. Or perhaps we should just decide we're just not going to do that, and we'll either reduce it or eliminate it. And one of the things that's hindered that process, and I know Terry brought this up earlier, but I've heard it from all the council members, so I don't really want to single out him, which is that our budget process in the city was pretty shocking to me, I confess, as a new council member, because I jumped in February and we're in the middle of the budget process, and it was extraordinarily difficult to get the simplest detail about the budget. That is, what the council was presented was large blocks of money that were not attached to particular programs. There wasn't even the minimal kind of evaluation to say we're spending, $1 million on this program and we're spending $2 million on that program. It was very hard to find that out, let alone whether that program was doing a good job, whether that program was really one that the citizens wanted compared to the other program. Obviously, there's constituency for every program, but some programs have way more support than others. There was no really good way to find that out. And one of the things I want to work on, and I know my fellow council members do as well, and I'm sure actually the new people will want to, as soon as you take a look at the budget, you'll get on board on this, is figuring out a way to move gradually, not immediately, to a much better budget process, because it will enable us to get a handle on things where we can legitimately and with the support of the community say, look, this is either not working very well, we should either tune it up, or this is something we don't want to do as much of, or we want to eliminate it entirely.
Thank you. Would you like to add anything, Mr. Berry?
Well, as Mark Twain once said, the worst form of death is to be talked to death. And from the looks of folks in the audience and up here on the dais, some of you seem to be in critical condition. The good news is that we have a wonderful hospital nearby, at least for the time being. No, what I'd like to add is I think we, over the last several years, have worked a lot to try to respond to citizens' reasonable concerns about, are we paying too much for this? Should we cut that? How about outsourcing janitorial services? Looked at that. Not really much of a savings. How about outsourcing trash collection? We looked at that. It would have actually cost more under the Montgomery County system to collect our trash. And then, of course, we have the added benefit of the leaf removal, which I think most people find, pretty useful and pretty well done. As far as economic development is concerned, yes, by all means, we should explore that, and we are. I think it'll be very effective around the margins, but certainly it's not going to be a panacea. I think that's going to come from the rebate formulas renegotiation. And I, for one, am fairly optimistic that over the next couple of years we will reach an agreement with the county, and we will be very pleased with what happens. We will reach that goal because of the connections that people on the council have, the mayor has, the former mayor will have, and the cast of characters has changed on the county council itself, and we also have a new county executive. So my concern is different than I think what we've heard so far, and this would be to focus on better service from the service providers that we already have. Most of the money in the budget goes for personnel. So the only way you're going to see substantial decreases in that amount is to get rid of people. And that means getting rid of services. It also means, because the budget is so top-heavy with personnel expenses, that every year those expenses go up because of union contracts and because of inflation. So we will see those costs continue to go up. So what people in my ward are telling me is, we want good service for money. For the most part, we're happy, but there are some notable things that go wrong from time to time, and these need to be fixed. One example, a constituent around the corner from me had something happen to her, and she was in the process of dealing with one of the city government departments, and she called me one day and said, I've called them 16 times, and I have not gotten a reply. And I said, well, that's completely unacceptable. So I phoned the head of the department, and the head of the department called that woman the very afternoon. And when I phoned the woman, she said, oh, I'm quite impressed. So-and-so called and told me that he was going to sort everything out. And he did. But the point of that story is that we still fall down, even though we're certainly far better, I think, at providing services through all the main departments than we were a couple of years ago. And this is thanks to our city manager and some changes that she had made. The chief of police certainly has done an excellent job in improving the service that the officers provide. But these are human systems that are created, and we as council members, I think, have an obligation to our constituents to make certain that the department heads do their job. And I think that over the next couple of years we'll be focusing a lot more on that to make sure that the service truly is as excellent as it can be, the best in the area, and certainly well worth the tax dollars that are spent.
Thank you. Well, we're coming up on an hour and a half, and we've answered 2 questions, I believe.
Sounds about par for the course.
So why don't we move to the lightning round? I came prepared with about a dozen questions, and so, go out and get food if you need. We're going to be here for a while. But one thing I was hoping to do tonight was get a question or 2 in from the audience. So instead of going on with a couple of the other questions I have, I'm wondering if there's anybody who's here tonight who has a quick question they'd like to put to candidates. And if not, I'm quite happy to provide them with one more. So, anybody? Oh, you can use the microphone right here.
Go ahead. Oh.
Can you hear me?
Oh.
Yes.
Okay. Given the attention in the recent years to climate change, and that Al just won the Peace Prize on Friday, as did the IPPC, I'm wondering what we might do to revive the climate change action plan that the city had developed in the late 90s, and council issued a resolution with an intent to implement in early 2000.
It's Catherine Tunis, by the way. Why don't Ward 3 candidates answer that first? Are you okay with that? Since, you know,
Sure.
people are trying to figure out between the two of you.
Okay. Good question. One answer is to take stock of where we are right now, then to develop a plan to reduce our energy footprint by some very large amount, because that's what we need to do, and then follow that plan and make it so. I mean, we need to do that. Mike Tidwell of the Chesapeake Climate Action Network lives in our town, and he can give lots of advice on that, some of those aspects. David Houck, who's the chair of the Sierra Club in Montgomery County, lives in town. He can give some excellent advice on how to do that, both for residents and for the city. And they're different creatures, but they can work together in this regard. On a person-to-person basis, I went into David Houck's house, and he showed me how to tighten it up, and he's cut his energy bill by 30–40%. So we can all do that, and we just need to do it. I don't know that there's any magic potion to make that happen other than to be serious about it.
Ms. Bowers?
I definitely, I'm not familiar actually with the legislation that you were talking about. However, hopefully people can agree that the environment is definitely an issue. And I think kind of it's always out there that it's an issue, and there's, but people don't necessarily know the exact ways to go about changing their own environment, their own home, et cetera, to make it more energy efficient and reduce their footprint. So I think kind of communication and education to the community, to those of us who aren't working in kind of some of the more environmentally conscious organizations, is hugely important. And I think for those people who this may not be on their radar screen, providing incentives, if at all possible, exploring incentives, tax abatements, et cetera, for things like Energy Star appliances or et cetera, might be an option to explore.
Okay. Anybody else on the panel like to address this issue? Yes. Ms. Clay.
Well, I think what we need to do is get the next mayor to put it on the agenda so that we can start talking about it. But I also want to say that our same audience, Catherine Tunis, who asked the question, suggested to me a couple of years ago, I was looking for a project to do, that I do a green building activity. I did do a green building conference and talked to the city planners about it, and the city planners then had one here in the city, and it was very successful. It was much better than mine that I did in Seattle, but it's much more residentially based. The residents came out and saw all the different kinds of things that they could do. Also, in the last year, our new city arborist has been talking to us about the loss of our tree canopy and what that's going to mean in the long term. And this month, I just bought 2 of the trees that the city was selling for, I think, $300 to $400 a piece to be planted around the perimeter of my house. There's a lot of things that we can do, but I would agree that we don't have a really coordinated effort, and I think that we need to be able to talk about that and get that on our agenda and work more closely with our Committee on the Environment.
I just want to add a quick comment. As Catherine knows, I was intimately involved in the creation of the city's greenhouse gas reduction plan with the grant that we got to do that in 1999 and 2000. And I think we had a great report at that point. I think to a certain extent we picked some low-hanging fruit, and then everything just kind of fell by the wayside, and we've kind of let it slide. I think the rest of the world has kind of caught up with us and in some ways passed us. So I think we need to kind of dust off that report, see how far we got, see what actions are remaining, and kind of look at it in the light of 2007, 2008. I know that the Council of Governments now has a don't know exactly what it's called, but it's a climate change action committee, and that's probably going to turn into a more permanent arm at the Council of Governments. They're pulling together what everybody else is doing locally. I made sure that they got the link for our report. I think we can gain from the experience and some of the knowledge that other local governments have, and the fact that everybody now is much more focused on it than they were in 2000. And so we can look at it again and see where we can go with it.
Just a few other things to add to that. I think the city first has to practice conservation, meaning, put lights on timers and do the simple things and do them right. Teach conservation, like these outreach efforts, so that people know how to do these gardens that we saw on the garden tour that had these fabulous things that recycle water from the rainwater and water their gardens that way. We need to purchase more wind power, as we did a couple of years ago. We need to redouble our efforts to make sure Sligo Creek is as clean as it can be, working with other jurisdictions to make sure that water flows through them, have similar efforts in place. Buy more trees. We need to purchase hybrid vehicles. There's a whole new generation of them coming out. There's no reason in a couple of years' time why all the police cars can't be hybrid and all of the city vehicles can't be hybrid. We also should not build another structure in the city that does not employ green principles. Tired of hearing that, can't afford that, too expensive. That's baloney. We need to incorporate those green principles, and we should look at retrofitting the existing structures that we have in the city, utilizing green technology and green principles.
I support that guy.
I agree with Doug that we as the city need to lead, but if you, in a pragmatic way also, we need to start with that. If you think about the actual footprint, the greenhouse gas footprint, it's the number of residents and everything that they do far outweighs what the city itself does. So I would really point to trying some programs to get residents to reduce their impact. A few that I can think of off the top of my head. One would be, I think we need to facilitate the purchase of the compact fluorescent light bulbs. So yes, it's easier to buy those now more and more every day, but it's hard to get dimmable ones. It's hard to get ones that are used outside. It's hard to figure out which one to buy that actually gives you a light that's not annoying. And they are still more expensive than regular bulbs. So I would suggest the city could start a cooperative buying program like they've done with the corn silo around fluorescent light bulbs. The second is I just learned from a constituent to echo Ruben's point. Many, I think, of your best ideas come from constituents. There's a program now where Montgomery County, if you buy wind power for your home, will give you 1 cent back per kilowatt hour. And this gentleman has done it, and it's not a cumbersome process. It's actually pretty easy to sign up and do the whole thing. And his electricity bill is 15% higher. And I know that everyone in Takoma Park can't afford to have a 15% higher electric bill, but I also know that there's a lot of people in Takoma Park that would be happy to pay 15% more on their electric bill if they knew that they were then emitting no greenhouse gases associated with their electric bill. And I think that's another no-cost option to the city itself, where we need to educate people in a pragmatic way, show them, break down the economics for them. And then lastly, I think we should pursue either federal or state money to create a loan program that allows people to do some of these improvements to their homes that make the homes more energy efficient. A lot of the things are small and we can do through education, people can do on their own, but a lot of them require significant upfront capital outlay that people simply don't have the money for, but they pay for themselves usually in 5 to 7 years. And so I think if we can get the funds from outside the city to set up a loan fund program, low-cost loan fund program where people can make those improvements and then pay back the loans, I think that would have a big impact as well.
Hi, my name is Wasafa. Thank you for this opportunity. What I have is actually, it's not a question, it's more of a statement, because it's not an easy question to deal with at this particular forum. I'll make a statement. I see 18 people in the audience. The social ice cream at Piney Branch brought a lot of people out. Why do we have that disconnect? I've been coming to the council meeting on a regular basis, and I don't see a whole lot of people. And the residents of Takoma Park are very vibrant, concerned, and motivated. So why do we have a disconnect? Because the community is a big asset, and it's a resource. I hear Councilman Snipper said activism, Terry said power to the people, because that is, the community has a lot of neglected asset. It has a political power. It can do lobbying on your behalf for all those tax rebates in this county level, state level, even federal level. But that community is neglected. We all say community, but I don't see it. I mean, it's a sad case. We're talking about the city of Takoma Park, and we have 18 people, price minus 17. And so to me, why do we have that disconnect with a very vital resource of the community? So what is your vision? What are you going to do? In the Ward 4, for the last year and a half, we've done, because of the leadership of Councilman Terry, we've done a lot of community activity with our own resources. And that fostered community, that fostered activism, and in fact, now we're prepared to bring a lot of people out for the voters, the voting. So my question that I pose as you look forward to serve us, what is that you can do? Because I see the community is neglected. I see a disconnect. I don't know whose fault that is, but I think that's quite an asset, a resource that needs to be tapped into buying local, into supporting the businesses, into political activism on a grassroots level, and asking the county, the state, and the federal to back up our government. So what is your vision? What are you going to do? Because as a community activist, I'm an activist. I'm going to be here. I'm going to do my best, but I need your encouragement, your support as a council. So.
Okay, thank you. I do agree that ice cream is probably the answer, but I hear several different questions actually, and I think that probably the main question you're asking is how we can get more input from the community in the council. And I guess you're seeing kind of a two-way street there. That many people don't come to city council meetings. We don't have a lot of people here tonight, etc. So anybody want to tackle that?
I just want to say that one of the things that I'd like to do is to make sure that the next council doesn't just give the opportunity for people to interact with us in this room, but that we get out into the community and have a chance to interact. One of the things that we did in the past was we had some walking council meetings that worked for a while, then it seemed to kind of fall by the wayside. I'm not sure that's the best answer. It's something that I advocated for at the time. I'd like to follow up on that with either that, something similar, have some discussion about how we can go out and maybe have some meetings in different locations, maybe have some additional ways that we get out and talk as a group with different people and have those interactions and get your ideas.
Okay. Anybody else like to respond? No.
I will. It's central to my platform for the ward to reach out and try to get at least quarterly meetings with all the neighborhood associations and streets, and I'm hoping that that'll be one way to start at least a conversation.
My day job is actually at a university doing alumni outreach and engagement. So that's kind of what I do day in, day out, is trying to engage people more effectively and kind of reconnect or connect them back to the university. I think a lot of it has to do with, you know what, you got to ask people. When I'm working with these alums, if you ask them to donate their time or their money, they're going to do it. But if you don't kind of get out there and ask them to get involved, it's not as likely to happen. And I think kind of communication, the only kind of way I knew to get involved is because my boyfriend's family, quite frankly, has lived here for 40 years and has been involved, and so I kind of knew to get involved. If I didn't have that connection, I wouldn't have known it. So I think kind of getting the communication out there in the most effective manner is critical. So.
Great. Thanks. Yeah, Mr. Berry?
Well, we also have more than 100 employees here at the city, and each one of those employees has innumerable contacts with people in the city, people that we don't see. But I find that the number one source of referral of constituents to me is through one of the city workers and departments. So I think one of the things that we should look at is the extent to which those referrals are encouraged and made in a systematic kind of forum, and that all of the city employees understand what the different services are, the services that we provide, so that by working through the 100 employees of the city, we can reach out to more people, because I think that's the number one contact point that people in the city have, is with the employees of the city, not necessarily with us. And to encourage those people to, once they've had a positive relationship with a city employee, of course they're not always positive with code enforcement and police and so forth, but even those contacts can sometimes be made positive. And then I think the other part of it is for us to try to encourage more of our constituents to join the innumerable committees that we have here in the city. I've found that just by asking people to volunteer for things, you get them involved in a way that they never have before, and once in, they're usually hooked. And lastly, what I'd like to find out from you, not tonight but another time, is how can we clone you? I mean, you're here from your ward, you're very active, very effective, your children are doing things, and it's more of you that we have to cultivate.
That's scary.
Not at all.
I can only say that because he's my constituent. I think obviously the answer is asking people to participate, asking people what they need. But I think it's more than that. I mean, as I look out from the council seat every week, I see a lot of the same people, and there's a large segment of the city that we don't seem to be reaching, and it isn't participating in our government. And I think as a council member, I have to examine myself. Am I asking? Maybe, but am I listening to what people really need? Because I think until we start to address what people are saying that they need, they're not going to be engaged in the process. I think back over the last year, and the one experience that I had where I really saw, for me, a little light dawn was I had many times asked people such as Tababu and some of the other members of the Ethiopian community that live in Ward 4 to come out to the community center, come to our council meetings and participate in the committees, join committees, and I got a blank wall every time. I was never able to overcome that. But when I sat down and said, what are your key issues? And they said, the thing that was the biggest concern to the Ethiopian community locally was their concern about their family and friends back in Ethiopia and the human rights abuses. And when this council addressed that and passed a resolution supporting a federal bill calling for human rights in Ethiopia, we had 200 members of Ward 4 here at the council meeting. They were Ethiopian residents who appreciated what we were doing at the council to support what they felt was their most critical need at that point in time. Out of that has grown Tababu Asefa coming to the meeting tonight, and other members of the neighborhood joining committees and participating in community events. So I think it's more than just asking the question, but it's listening to what's needed and trying to address all community members, not as one big unit, but as what is it that the people's concerns really are, and how can we address those concerns?
Thank you. Maybe make our last question from Pat. Are you up at the mic?
Yes, my name's Pat Lovelace, 7620 Maple Avenue, Takoma Park. And I want to ask all the candidates, especially the new candidates, what are you going to plan to do? What are you going to plan to do to keep affordable housing in our city? I heard you mentioning affordable housing, but you didn't quite touch on that. What are you planning on doing to keep it in our city? Also, anyone watching out there, I want to tell them, be responsible, mature, grown-up adults. Come out and vote. If I can do it, you can do it. Thank you.
Okay, Any quick answers on that? I see that Takoma Park Cable is getting ready to go. So, any quick answers?
Sure. I mean, I think the quick answer is I'm not sure. I think something needs to be done now so that affordable housing grows instead of shrinks in Takoma Park. I'd say benchmarking and kind of gathering some experts together from all kind of sides of the issue is probably where I'd start.
Yeah, I would pick it apart too and educate myself and see what percentage of housing falls in various categories: large building, medium building, small building. What we can do to encourage more accessory apartments in homes, and what impact that might have. And I have a lot to learn as well.
Okay, I think we'll leave it at that for comments tonight. I think this was a pretty successful roundtable on the council, and it gave candidates and current council members a chance to talk about their jobs in a way that they frequently don't have. I worry that it wasn't quite the best forum for showcasing our two Ward 3 candidates, and if you're in Ward 3, as I am, you have to choose between these two. So before we close, I'd like to have each of them let us know how we can find out more information about their campaign and their issues. So if you have a website or other information you'd like to, say it slowly. If you're at home, get ready. You might have to put the recorder on pause, so you make sure you get this down. But what is your website?
Sure. My website is BridgetBowers.com. It's BridgetBowers.com.
Okay. And Mr. Robinson?
Dan Robinson for Council, just the way it sounds, .org.
Okay, and if you want to write one more URL down, Takoma.com, that's not too hard to remember. I'll put up all of this information, and for the other candidates who also have websites, we'll put that up there and put a link to your website so that if you go to the Takoma.com, you should be able to get as much information as you can about the campaigns. So with that, I'd like to thank everybody for coming out tonight. I'd like to thank you at home. I'd like to thank you watching on your PC.
And thank you, Eric Bond.
Yeah, thanks, Eric.